This is a grade 2 commercial passage function lever. It's put out by a company by the name of Marx, and it's available on lockpeddler.com. And I'm going to show you how to install this lock step by step. And I can't say enough good things about this particular product. This is a grade 2 lock. However, in my opinion, it almost holds up just as well as a grade 1. I mean, they're very hard to kill. Now, this particular installation does involve a through bolt installation, so you do have to drill a hole at the top and also at the bottom of the lever to accommodate these two extra screws, but it does add a lot more stability to the lock, and it really keeps that lock on the door for a lot longer period of time without any kind of shake or anything like that. So let's start with step one. For this installation, you're going to need just a few things. One, you're going to have a drill. You want to have a Phillips head bit or a Phillips head screwdriver, and then you're going to need a 3/8 drill bit to drill the hole for the top and the bottom through bolt. And that's pretty much all you're going to need for this installation. This is a typical 2 3/4 commercial back set prep that you would find on just about any office or building door that would accommodate one of these particular style of locks. And in this case, you can see that there are no through bolt holes drilled. So what we're going to need to do is, of course, drill those holes. And just about all of these companies put out a template to go with their lock. You just fold on the dotted line, and you put that fold right on the edge of the door. And you want to make sure that this template is right where it needs to be. And how you do that is you line these crosshairs up with that hole, the center of that hole. It's got to be exactly correct, and make sure that that line stays right where it needs to be on the edge of the door. And what I normally do in order to mark these is I'll just use a knife. Some people use like a scratch-awl or something like that, but I just use a knife. All you're trying to do is make a little mark so you know where to drill. Now when it comes to drilling these, what I do is I will drill here and here, but I'll only take the hole halfway into the door. And the reason why I do that is so that you don't splinter going through the other side of the door. And it will splinter every time if you try to drill straight through. So drill halfway through, and then halfway through, and then go to the other side of the door and drill halfway through and halfway through at the top and the bottom. And you want to use the template on both sides so you don't have any kind of deviation on that, because these bolts have to line up perfectly. But it's not that difficult. It really isn't. Just as long as you use the template correctly. I'm going to show you how to drill this now. Okay, so now that you've got both sides marked correctly with your template, you can move on to step 2, and that's just drilling the hole halfway through the door. But in this case, of course, we're going to use a template. Now we're going to go to the bottom. Now it doesn't have to be exactly halfway through the door, just as long as you don't punch through the other side of the door, because that is when you run into the splintering issue. And just like that, our holes are drilled, and we're ready for installation. We'll move on to step 3. Alright, step 3, we're going to go ahead and install this particular latch. And you have to decide which direction your door is going to be swinging. So if the door is going this direction, you want to make sure that that latch is facing that strike plate and will retract on impact. And of course, if the door is going to be facing this direction, you want that latch to face the opposite direction. But in this particular case, we're going to go ahead and face it that direction and install it with 2 screws at the top and the bottom. And this is a relatively easy installation. So there's our top. Now, as you can tell, I'm using a drill driver for this, but you can use a screwdriver. It's really not a hard installation at all. And we're going to move on to our step number 4. Okay, step number 4, you're going to want to pay very close attention to this lip right down here, and this one up top, and then this one here and here. And this is the actual pullback piston for the latch itself. We're going to go ahead and slide our lock in so we can see it from this side. Make sure everything lines up correctly in that window where it's supposed to go. You want to make sure that you check for operation at this point, just to make sure everything is pulling where it's supposed to pull. Now we're going to move on to step 5. Okay, step 5, we're going to go ahead and install our bevel plate, also known as a rose. And as you can see, you have a little outlet here and here that are going to need to go into these 2 holes. And we're going to line that up on our spindle, just like that, and just give it a little push. And just like that, we're ready to go ahead and install these 2 screws at the top and the bottom. And you want to make sure that these screws line up with the receiving threads on the other side of this lever. Make sure you tighten the lever down and it's not moving around, because sometimes people will miss the threading on the opposite side. Now if it's a wood installation, it's going to be just about automatic. But on a metal door, of course, you're going to need to kind of look for those threads on the opposite side of the door. Just be careful on that particular part. It won't be that difficult though. These are relatively very simple locks to install. Now we're going to move on to step number 6. Okay, step 6. We're going to install our cover plate here. And you can see that there's a dimple here and there's a little line right here. And you just want to line those 2 up and just give it a little push. And just like that, your plate's installed. We're going to move on to our final step, installing the lever. Okay, step 7, we're going to go ahead and install our lever, and it just fits over the spindle just like that, and just give it a little push. And test for operation just to make sure that everything is going where it's supposed to go. And that concludes our installation of this particular lever handle, which is made by Marx and is available on lockpeddler.com. Now, just in case you happen to need to remove one of these particular levers and then reinstall a new one, I wanted to show you how to actually remove this particular lock. You're going to need to use your little push pin that comes with the lock, the new lock, and push in on the retainer. There's a little hole here, and there's a retainer that you're going to need to push back, and that will release this lever. And then once that lever is released, you just pull, it comes off right in your hand, and now we'll go to step 2 of removal. Okay, step 2 of uninstall, you're going to need to pry this particular rose off with this bevel plate. You're going to use either a flathead screwdriver. I'm just using a knife. I would probably prefer that you use a flathead screwdriver. And now we're going to move on to step 3, which is just simply unscrewing these 2 screws. Okay, step 3, we're going to go ahead and remove the top and bottom screws. We're just going to set those aside. Now here's the tricky part. With this particular product, there is a little retainer. Now this retainer is going to keep you from pulling this rose plate or bevel plate off. So what you're going to need to do is push that retainer in as you pull this plate off. Just like that, and then you set that aside. Now we'll move on to step 4. Okay, step 4 is pretty simple. Just rock the lock back and forth and side to side and pull at the same time, and it'll come right out in your hand. And now we're going to move on to step 5, removal of the latch. Okay, step 5, we're going to remove this latch with these 2 screws. There's 1, there's 2, and then we'll just set that aside. And that is the removal of the Marx passage function grade 2 lever, available from lockpeddler.com. Thanks for watching.